Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to resume. Ask you to return to your seats as we get the next session underway. We have spoken to the President of Guyana, who will be getting his comments to us later today because he's in a meeting now. So please be seated. All right, ladies and gentlemen, our next session, Redefining Regional Development Blueprint, Positioning for Opportunities in Dealing with Inflationary and Recessionary Environments. The very important topic of how to manage inflation and how to run your business efficiently in an inflationary space. And this session will be led by moderator, Mr. Richard Williams, Assistant Vice President, Investment Strategy and Portfolio Advisory at Barita Investments. And he will introduce his panel. Please welcome Richard Williams to the podium.
Good morning, colleagues. I'll just invite my fellow colleagues, Mrs. Stacey Ann Tate is the Senior Vice President with responsibility for investments at NCB Capital Markets. Dr. Damian King, I think he doesn't need any further introductions, and I know he loves to be called by his first name, Damian. And Omar Ziola, who is a research analyst at Oppenheimer. Please, colleagues, can have a seat. We are really pressed for time, and so we'll get into it rather quickly. The conference theme is Capital Markets Redefined, Achieving the Impossible. And in some respects, the juncture at which we are now is somewhat reminiscent of the 1920s, just on the eve of the pandemic then. And we hear about the roaring 20s, which is the period that ensued thereafter, which was characterized by several fundamental changes, both in the economy and in the social lives. And so in some respects, that is perhaps what the conference theme here today is aiming at. What kind of fundamental changes are we observing and can anticipate going forward? Our specific panel will be examining the theme, Redefining Regional Development Blueprint, positioning for opportunities dealing with an inflationary and recessionary environment. I think if we do get into a recession, it might be the most telegraphed recession we have ever seen. And that is quite topical now, against the backdrop of also a rather sticky inflationary environment. And so we want to set the context by just hearing the panelists' view on how do they see the current macroeconomic environment in affecting the investment landscape in the region. And are any of those observations pointing to fundamental change? We can perhaps start with, I'll start with you, Stacey, just to allow Damien to. Can you hear me? Omar, can you?
Yes, hi.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Hi.
can go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Well, we are expecting, as you well said, a recession coming up. I believe that the inverted yield curve in the U.S. Treasury is telegraphing that, as you mentioned. The indications that we have so far, or at least based on current information, we think that the recession, if there is one, will be mild and most likely short-lived. And I could mention, three factors to consider there. The first one is, at least in the U.S., the labor market continues to be very tight, meaning that there are a lot of job openings that are being unfilled. There's still a lot of employers looking for people to fill those jobs, and they're very hard to find. So this is going to keep, in our view, wages high, higher than they would be in a regular recession, and also the unemployment rate relatively lower. Another thing to consider also is the fact of what the Fed actions may be at the first signs of an economic slowdown. I believe that the Fed might pause raising interest rates and may start to cut interest rates when they see that there is the first signs of economic slowdown. I know that's probably a contentious view right now, but we believe that's something that's likely to happen. And the most recent projections, at least for our region, Caribbean and South America, Latin America, there are expectations for positive economic growth for, if you take the year 2023 as a whole. So we see that a potential recession may not be too disruptive.
Okay, thank you, Omar. Stacey?
All right, I'm back now. Good. So some fundamental things. We were hoping for 2023 we'd have seen the back of inflation, high interest rates, and war. But unfortunately, we still have those three big themes, and they're going to be fundamental for us this year. So when we think about inflation, why is that fundamental? Why is that big? We haven't seen this level. Well, you can tell by my age. I haven't seen this level of inflation for a while. And of course, we were used to stability, especially too on the local front. And that level of inflation being high is expected to continue into 2023. Interest rates have paused. The Bank of Jamaica has paused its policy hiking rates. But even though it has paused, it is expected that interest rates will remain high into 2023. And of course, there's a theory of war. War upsets everything. And not until there is some meaningful ceasefire, anything can happen between the Russia and Ukraine crisis. So what I'll say to you, though, is that they are pivotal for 2023 because there is going to be a significant change and an inflection in that as we look at the changes in the business cycle.
All right, thank you, Stacey. Damien?
Inflation and recession have visited the economic climate before. So neither one is new or interesting on its own, but not very often we have both inflation and recession at the same time. And that is what makes this an unusual climate. But speaking to each one, inflation is going to be a temporary phenomenon. We have not only achieved a relatively low inflation consensus around the world in terms of the importance of inflation, but in Jamaica, the central bank has committed not only verbally to low and predictable inflation, but we have seen that to everyone else's upset, they have backed up that commitment with increases in their policy rate, with unpopular increases in their interest rates to support their commitment to low inflation. So long term, this is going to be a low inflation economy and environment, and we should be planning for the long term. As far as a recession is concerned, it doesn't matter really whether what we face is a recession or a slowing down or a couple more years of stagnation. The point is that profits are going to be squeezed in the near term. Equity values are going to fall. And, I was happy that Mr. Warner in the previous presentation used a cricket analogy. Once you know what is the wicket that you're batting on, and if you're a good batsman, then you will adjust your strategy to that wicket. And if the wicket we're batting on is one where we're going to have, a squeeze of demand and equity values are going to fall, and so companies know that they have to harbor their cash. Private equity companies like the equity capital that I represent know that we need to have dry powder. Then you can sort of navigate this and just make it through it to the long-term optimism and growth that we know is coming.
All right, thank you for that, Damian. In fact, I also like the cricket analogy. And sometimes when you're at the wicket, no matter how skillful a batsman you are, you can be bowled a bouncer. It's completely unanticipated. What might be some of those not telegraphed developments now that business thinkers and leaders might want to think about that might not necessarily be on their radar?
That's a kind of a difficult.
All right, so you're gonna get the catch. Great.
That's a sort of a difficult question. There is enough concern about the changes to the economic climate that we know about. We spoke about inflation. We spoke about recession. We also have two other things in our line of sight that we know the wicket is doing. One is an appreciation now of the riskiness of the geopolitical climate. This is not only because of the Ukraine war, but also because of the political situation in China. And related to that, we also know that the era of, I guess, unimpeded globalization, we're going to recede from that. And so businesses need to pay more attention to resilience in their supply chains than in the past, where efficiency was the only consideration. So all of those are the changes we can anticipate. And as businesses and private equity companies, we have those in sight. It's difficult to ask what are the unexpected ones because they're unexpected. But what we have learned over the last couple of decades is that you do need to plan for unexpected events, even without knowing what is the nature of the unexpected event. What we have learned is that the world is not only uncertain, but it is uncertain in unpredictable ways. Nobody was planning for a pandemic. Nobody was planning for a war in Europe. So it really says that companies need to pay some attention to resilience for whatever might be coming.
Right. Thank you for that, Damian. Just by way of an announcement here, it might pay quite literally for you to pay rapt attention. We have 2 gift certificates here from NCB Capital Markets, and I'll be asking 2 questions, perhaps at the end from the presentation. So please take notes. It won't be difficult. It won't be a difficult question at all. I just want to just follow up and round out the idea of geopolitics, because one of the very interesting observations that we have seen, particularly in the investment sphere, is that a lot of investment research firms, even those who are focused on traditional macroeconomics, are now onboarding a lot of geopolitical experts. In fact, I think one of the foremost authorities on it has written a book some time ago on it called, Geopolitical Alpha. This increasingly is something that you need to consider, both as an investment practitioner as well as a leader of industry. So I want to ask Omar, how do you factor in political and geopolitical risk when analyzing the regional economic environment? What are you seeing now? Do you have a view there?
Yes. Of course, the geopolitical events have become much more influential, I believe, in the recent past. And as you know, our region is a region that's very strong in commodities, and it's a large exporter of commodities. And commodity prices are very much subject to geopolitical events. In terms of the region and the companies, as our guest here well mentioned, preparedness is the only way you can sort of work through those events, because an event in China or a war in Europe, climate changes, dry spells, adverse climate affect very quickly the price of commodities, and it could affect, of course, the balance sheet, the cash flow of the countries and the companies in our region. So the best way to be prepared for that is companies and countries have no other way than to just always have liquidity, have a strong balance sheet, have a good relationship with banks that are prepared to lend to them when their need arises, and when their results and cash flow become weaker than they expected, and it's from unforeseen events.
All right, thank you, Omar. Sure. So Stacey, we want to get into some of the specific, I suppose, investment strategies that both businesses and owners of capital can pursue to navigate this environment, just given this kind of backdrop that both Omar and Damien has painted just now, and yourself. What are your thoughts there?
Sure. So, oh, you're making notes. Good. All right. So when you think of a recession, there is normally large-scale fear because things slow down. And slowing down impacts companies, it impacts earnings, it impacts demand, it impacts supply. There are a lot of fears. But we've been touting this, and we continue to tout this. In every bad situation, there's always an opportunity. So how do you get yourself ready for a recession, and how do you capitalize on it? So let's first start with investors. For investors, risk management is going to become heightened. And incredibly so. You understand why? Because there's a slowdown. So when you think about heightened risk management, it doesn't mean stifling economic activity or growth. Heightened risk management from the standpoint of they will be more scrutinizing credit risk, looking at credit risk. Not a lot of things that come to the table will all get passed through or become successful investments. They will be far more scrutinizing the stability of the companies, their market position, their ability to generate, and then linked to credit risk is also leadership. Leadership is going to be very important in when you look to invest, to see, does the leadership at the table have the capacity to weather the storm, be strategic, and to create opportunities in the environment and to see their strategic decisions through. And then we think about diversification. That's important. Now, diversification doesn't mean that you have to have 50, 100 positions in a portfolio. But how do you diversify from a standpoint of asset classes to be able to benefit from the upturns. Now, that looks very different. There's always a place for equity. It doesn't matter which market you're in, whether the market is expansionary, whether it's heading into a recession, there's always a place for equity. So when you look at equity, you look at public equities, you look at value investment. And in addition to that, you look at companies for which are new to the market, have a good growth story, and those could be public also. And then private equity, which is something that NCB Capital Market does, it focuses both on small, medium enterprises as well as well-developed companies. And private equity plays a part in the equity asset class. And then you think about fixed income. Fixed income is something that is good in a rising interest rate environment. A lot of persons would have benefited, especially those income type investors last year. They would have benefited from significantly higher rates. And in terms of going into a recession, when you think about it, bonds are going to become very critical again. Now, all those three factors, it impacts not just investors, but it also impacts the persons who are seeking risk capital. Because the person seeking risk capital, they too have to diversify. And what do I mean by that? I mean by looking at their capital structure. So previously in a low interest rate environment, you may be utilizing debt nonstop. But in a higher interest rate environment, you may need to look at equity capital. And when interest rate peaks, it's not just going to immediately fall back down. There is going to be some leveling off and stability, and that makes an impact. So it's diversification too of the capital structure. And then when we speak about, heightened risk management, then issuers and persons seeking risk capital will also have to pay attention to that, because that will be impacting what is successful when they come to the market.
All right, thank you for that, Damien. That's yes, I was coming right to you, Damien. Sure.
I'd like to add something, within all of this talk about recession. We do know that the challenges that we spoke about earlier, especially rising interest rates, are going to have a dampening effect on the economy. But we need to bear in mind that there are forces going in the opposite direction as well. In the same way that, forest fires are good for forests because it clears out the detritus and it allows opportunities for new shoots to grow. Recessions serve a purpose in an economy. Recessions, one of the constraints to new businesses and new ideas is that it has to persuade working capital and labor to leave their existing deployment. And what recessions do is they free up resources. So new ideas can grow in a more propitious environment. And we have just come out of a severe recession. We just come out of a pandemic that did exactly that. 2021 was a record year for new business registrations with the Companies Office of Jamaica. So the roots of expansion are already present in the economy. That is going to be working against the recessionary factors. It also gives a kickstart to people who are reluctant to leave their jobs and take a risk on the business idea they always had. Well, the unemployment, took care of that constraint. Many of them were forced to go into the business idea they always had. And so those factors are going to be pushing towards economic growth at the time that we have contractionary factors at the same time. So let us not leave here with this recession idea, which is real, occupying all of our heads, and recognize that there is impetus for economic growth in the economy as well, and it is going to be manifest.
All right, thank you for that, Damon. That's a very timely comment. And I really just want to combine that perspective with the private equity arguments that Stacey raised just now, along with your own, I should say, one of your many roles as chairman of Equity. How should we be thinking about, private equity strategies in this environment, particularly for the small and medium companies? From your perspective as chair of the Equity, Damien.
Well, it has it has been said over and over in this conference, both yesterday and today, that situations like this in an economy create opportunities at the same time as it creates challenges. And so one has to look at the opportunities in an environment where people are cautious and equity values have fallen. So the strategy is to make sure that your fund is liquid enough to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. There are many, many potentially good, potentially thriving businesses that are going to be short of cash precisely because demand is constrained, precisely because budgets are squeezed, but it's fundamentally underlying a good business. What they need is capital. So there are going to be many opportunities for private equity companies to exploit that, put new capital in fundamentally good businesses, and that benefits both parties.
All right, thank you. Omar.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I'm sorry. No, I just want to mention that, that's what was just said. It was absolutely right. But I just want to add to that. If you look at the Latin America as a whole, especially South America, the recent inflation bout and the potential for a recession could worsen the social unrest, the social discontent that we've seen in countries in the region. Like we've seen that being played out right now in Peru, and it's been affecting a lot of companies. It's been preventing some companies from producing, some mining companies, and so forth. And at the same time, I think that has the potential, is the risk that it actually is already making private equity investors and all foreign investors a little bit more conservative when it comes to investing in the region. And that's cutting the supply of capital to lower rated companies or smaller companies, and that's creating it's creating an issue for that sector of those economies. I just wanted to mention that. I think it's relevant in terms of in the context of the whole region.
Yeah, that's an important overlay. And what I gather from that, Omar, obviously, is that and it parallels perfectly with Stacey's point about the increased attention to just risk management, and therefore that will have implications for your capital management. Well, time really. Are you sure about that? All right. So what I'll do is, if there are any questions from the audience, to panelists, you can just go there, and one question. All right. So I'll just give that to Keith, and then I'll ask the two questions to give away the prize. Go ahead, Keith.
Hi, Damien. Maybe you can expand on your views on the global economy, just to say, from a financial sector perspective, just to say, is there one risk, and maybe this is for Omar as well, is there one risk, perhaps it's in the private equity / private credit space in the United States, where it might be less transparent than in other areas, that you are thinking of in terms of a black or white or whatever swan you want to call it, that you don't think is being assessed properly in the current environment, and maybe there may be a miss. No, I think you can answer that too. Give your opinion. Might be wrong. I know this is impossible to forecast, and you will tell me why, but I think you could still make a guess and give the appropriate caveat. And this is also for Omar, and maybe for Richard.
I'll cease to.
It's a very good question. I don't know if you like to say it. I mean, it's a very good question. I mean, there are concerns in the U.S. about the private equity market, some sectors of the loan market, and I'm not an expert in those specific sectors, but basically, I won't be surprised if there are issues come up in terms of some portfolios that blow up, some credits that don't stop paying, even some fraud or other type of illegal activity. That usually comes up in these time periods, right after there was a change in the market, right, or whether there was inflation. And I believe if we have a recession, then those risks are even higher.
But you don't have one single area that you have the most concern about versus other areas.
Okay. Unfortunately, we have a hard stop, Keith, so we'll just give 10 seconds there, and then I'll just...
Sure. I don't have one specific sector, no. I don't follow that very closely, but I don't have one specific sector that I could mention.
Okay.
The auto sector, maybe the auto lending sector, the used car lending sector, maybe one of them.
All right, thank you, panelists. I'll just use 30 seconds, Andre, just to give away this. So the first question I have, maybe, Andre, I'll ask you to identify who the person is that first raise a hand. What purpose do recessions serve in the economy? That's so. No, Dr. King basically covered that. Do you have an answer? He mentioned that recessions serve a particular purpose in the economy. No. Okay, there's a gentleman there.
Morning, Jordan Ferguson from the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority. So recessions actually facilitate new businesses to grow via the new ease of movement of labor.
Yes, sir. You are very much correct. The second question is, yeah, that's fine. So Stacey went through a range of ways or strategies that we can play this environment, inflationary environment, and an impending recession. Anybody can state one of those strategies that she mentioned? Oh. Where's it?
Hello, Kevin McIntosh, CFO at Equity. She mentioned risk management, diversification, and focusing on leadership.
Yes, sir. You're very much correct. He's correct, right? All right. Thank you very much for your rapt attention. I certainly enjoyed that conversation. Thank you, panelists, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you very much, Richardo, for skillfully putting us through that session. I really want to thank, we have to thank our sponsors, our main sponsors, Jefferies, NCB Capital Markets, Equity Capital, and the Jamaica Pegasus for hosting us here today and to being our major sponsors. Also, the Jamaica Observer, Television Jamaica, Oppenheimer, Fosrich, Dollar Financial Services, C&W Business, Barita Group, JMMB Group, Proven Wealth, Canadian Securities Exchange, Solid PVC Pipes, Intelligent Media Limited, Caribbean Alternative Investment Association, and then, of course, the subsidiaries and divisions of the Jamaica Stock Exchange, Caribbean Business Exchange, CBX, Jamaica Central Securities Depository, JCSD Trustee Services, the Jamaica Stock Exchange eCampus, and of course the Jamaica Social Stock Exchange. On the point of the Jamaica Social Stock Exchange, you may be aware that we opened a telethon in the middle of December, closing at the end of January in a couple of days. Pledge to win some support for some of our 3 social projects still in need of funding. The Jamming Music Project, sited in Trenchtown, the birthplace of reggae music. Stop the Violence Project, which is a character development and financial literacy project. And the Shalom Project by Choose Life, which is a mental health and wellness project. Now, we are all for development of financial capital, but we understand that social capital is a big part of what has to happen. We have to develop our people, hence the Jamaica Social Stock Exchange. So, which will bring transparency and accountability to how social projects are managed and funded. With that in mind, there are some pledge forms on your tables, and we're asking you to just complete those pledge forms so that we can assist in mobilizing capital for these projects. All right, thank you very much. Next up, we have a discussion on renewable energy, leading economic recovery and development in the Caribbean, the big topic of renewable energy. And I'm going to ask Mr. Cecil Foster, the reigning king of the Junior Stock Exchange, CEO of the Fosrich Group, best performing company on the Junior Stock Exchange for the last 2 years, to be our moderator today. Welcome, Cecil.
He's my neighbor, people. He's my neighbor. So he will say good things. This is, I think, a very, very important part of the conference. We must have a conversation. This conversation must take place with no one else but yourself. No modern economy in the world can be built without the right energy mix. The globe has gone digital. And you heard our minister yesterday reminded us that we want to go fully digital, and also the prime minister. We consume energy even without knowing it. And therefore, sometimes the only time we know that there is energy is when we feel it, when it shocks you or something. But we have to have this. Jamaica and the Caribbean, we are so well placed, they say, where the sunshine may be at its best in the Caribbean. And this is why most of you, when you travel, you can't wait to come back home and feel the sun beating on your skin. And that's why also so many tourists come to Jamaica, and they come year after year after year. We must have this conversation, and I'm saying, we at Fosrich are saying, we can't wait for the government to move. I think there needs to be a groundswell of people speaking one language in order for us to move in the direction of saving our planet, helping to find the right mix of energy, and also to grow the economy and make something of it. Today, I have some well-trained and versed people who are going to be coming and sharing in this discussion. And you are going to be also sharing in this discussion as we move into talking about it. We have Mr. Hector Mendoza. He is the commercial director of Fosrich Company Limited. And he is an engineer and an electrical and lighting specialist. And we welcome you, sir. And then we have Mr. Sadler, Mr. Darian Sadler. He is from Fosrich, one of our engineers, and he leads the engineering drive out there as Fosrich is working hard to grow this side of the business and the knowledge. Martin Monday. He is another engineer, but he represents our partner, that is Huawei, in the Latin America and the Caribbean. And so he and his company, they are here to play a part in showing us how we can develop this market. Victor Salgado. He is the manager of smart PV systems at Huawei. And we will be We are happy to have you. He has many years in building out in Latin America the footprint of solar business and solar smart technology in the Caribbean. Gentlemen, we are here to talk about this thing which they say can and will change the face of any economy. How can we use solar in particular, not just renewable energy, but solar in particular, to grow the economies of the Caribbean and get the economic growth that we are looking for? I'm going to ask each person to share their opening statement, 1 minute, and then each person except Victor. Victor will be asked to do a short presentation, and then we lead into a more fulsome discussion, and then after that, we have questions from the persons who are here. So, starting with Mr. Mendoza, how can this energy source, natural energy source, be used to drive economic growth in the Caribbean?
Okay, good morning to everyone, and thank you for being here. Sorry for my English also, because, I mean, you know that I'm not speaking not a natural speaker, an English speaker, sorry, but I will try to do my best, as we also always try to do that matter. Yes, for sure. I mean, when we are talking about renewable energy, there is a huge market there. It's a huge opportunity, as we already know, right? I mean, our region, Central America and the Caribbean, has the main issue that we have with the energy is the cost of the energy, right? And when we are seeing all the opportunities that we are having in that sector, and all the potential market, but also all the space for improve and reduce the carbon print that we have, I mean, we understand that we must do something, right? And that's why in Fosrich, we were discussing this matter from a long time ago, and 3 years ago, we decided to bet for this matter, right? This is our big bet, because we want to be also part of the market, but also do something different that makes sense, not just for the company, but also for the country, okay? And that is the important. And that's why when we were talking about this matter, we were looking for not just to do something with any brand, is with reliable partners, because we need to give that space to the country to have reliable sources on energy. And that is a matter that we are still seeing, that it's a huge space. We will see that we are not where we need it, right? And the space that we have in the market to improve that source of energy is huge. It's a huge opportunity. That's why I'm thinking, if we bet for that, the economy is we are going to give a little space, or give just something that will help. We're going to do something that will help to recover the energy. Okay?
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Darian Sadler.
Good morning.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. Are you hearing me?
Yes, yes.
All right, perfect. Darian Sadler here, solar team lead for the Fosrich Company Limited. Basically, for me, I am of the view, and my part here is really to show how Fosrich, with a partnership with solar providers such as Huawei, or partners, and other partners like Jinko Solar, we have solutions which effectively will impact all Jamaicans from a residential space, commercial and industrial, where we are reducing and managing your energy costs, focused on solar power solutions. That's it for me for now.
Okay, thank you. Very short. Martin.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
How can we change the face of the Caribbean and Jamaica?
We sure can. I'm very happy to be participating in this event, and that an event of this magnitude is raising the point of renewable energies. Like Mr. Foster mentioned, I think Jamaica is positioned geographically with a gift. That is, the sun is almost always shining, and we have to take advantage of that opportunity. In the past, the energy transition driver was mainly focused on environmental benefits. But with the recent events that we've been seeing in the past years, the main driver now is focusing for energy security, not only environmental benefits. So renewable energy, like some people like to call it now, is the energy of peace. It's a more affordable energy, and it's a more long-term solution for countries that want to advance in their economic space. So I hope that by raising this point here, Jamaican citizens, Jamaican business owners, and the Jamaican economy can take advantage of the opportunity that brings renewable energies here.
Very good. Very good. Victor will not give an opening statement. What he will do, he will come and he will do a presentation for a couple of minutes. And then from there, we will now open up for more wider discussion. Victor, I now invite you.
We have to move a little, I think so.
Thank you for the invitation. Sorry, my English is not good, so I will try to do my best effort, okay? So I am solution manager. I work for Huawei. I will be focused on what Huawei is doing to support renewable energies right now. So most important thing, we have to know what are the global trends. And the global trends right now are the low carbon and digitalization. You know, most of the country now, they already set a low carbon emission. More than 100 countries already set some low carbon emission. So we have to focus on that. If we can build some low carbon society, we can achieve this target. And also the second global trend is digitalization. Everything is moving to digital. After pandemic, we're using more rates of internet. We are now using cloud. So meetings, energy are doing by internet. So we have to move to digital, and always it will be supported by artificial intelligence. So these are the two most global trends right now. So we have to focus on that. Huawei is focusing on these two main points. So, and also there is another important thing. Using renewable will bring off different benefits. What are those benefits? For example, to lower electricity costs. You know, there is a rise of electricity costs by the gas, by electricity. So we have to use renewable. In this, for example, in your house, you can have your own energy or PV or storage in your house. With this, you can reduce your own electricity. And also, you can use a greener electricity. So this is very important. Also, another important piece is that the reduction of carbon emission. And another point is that we create work opportunities. Most of the thing is that we can create more work opportunities because there are different projects. Even if residential, commercial, industrial, utility, it will brings more opportunity to work. So this will also move the economy of the country. Sorry. So as Huawei, we focus on all the segments. We have solutions from utility scale for generation, for larger scale generation. We have solutions for commercial and industrial. We have solutions for residential. Also, we are supporting microgrids. You know, most of the challenge of the island are the outage of electricity. So, but with microgrids in different communities, we can, for example, give electricity to those communities. So this is another point that we can focus. So Huawei is supporting this type of solution also. And the other important thing is that now we have solution for storage. We have solution for residential, for commercial and industrial, and for utility scale projects. As an experience, Huawei already have a lot of experience in the Caribbean and Latin American region. We have more than 208 global products already sold around the world. And in Latam, we have over 9 gigawatts already sold. So we have experience in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we hope to keep growing more and more in the incoming next year. I have to show that as a Huawei, also we give support. We give support to Fosrich because we also have a Jamaica branch here. Even we have a Huawei office here. So we support our partners always. So this is very important. We have different offices in this region, more than 7 offices that will support all of our partners. So we are trying that the partner feel comfortable that Huawei will support everywhere. And I will show some success cases and some application that we can use. For example, here we can install in the airport some PV, so we can take advantage of install some PV in the airport. Also, sorry. Already we have other projects in the Blue Emerald. This is a 100 kilowatt project using 2 type of inverter, a 60 kilowatt inverter and a 40 kilowatts inverter. And this application is to reduce the consumption. Okay, so you will get some benefits of installing also solar. This is another installation. This is in our office here in Jamaica. It's a 35 kilowatt installation, and it's in a 3-phase connection, in a 220 volts connection, and also for auto consumption application. This is another success case. This is the Fostridge warehouse. This is 29 kilowatt installation using the 20 kilowatt inverter. If you see in the pictures, you will see inverters can install outdoors. So this is another advantage. You can install the inverter at outdoors. And also, you can have some storage in your house. For example, if you want to use the grid, you can use the energy a day by PV, and then at night you can use storage, so you can have 24 hours of greener energy for your house. So this is another application that we also support. And this is another project in Barbados. This is a 144 kilowatts installation. So also I have to explain that our equipment supports this tropical region. So it have a IP66 protection and can work very well at outdoors environment. And one of the incoming trends is the storage. So we have one of the biggest project in the Red Sea. It's a 1.3 gigawatt hour storage. Right now is on the building. And we have another 2 projects. The second one is in Chile. And the third one right now is already commissioned. It's the first project already commissioned in Central America. It's located in Guatemala, and it's a 4 megawatt and 4 megawatt hour project. It's already commissioned, so we already also have experience in the storage in this region. So we hope to have some projects also here in the island. And also, as I mentioned, we have some experience at utility projects. This is one of the largest projects in Dominican Republic. It's a 30 megawatt project for generation. So and thank you for this slot. And one of the important things I have to mention that we have to face many challenges. And as a Huawei, we want to give you solutions. We want to support you and help you to keep growing, not just economical, also to help you in the energy transition. Because, you know, right now it will be an energy transition, and we have to support you through digital and making the energy smart. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Here's where you said some things about energy storage. I think we're in our interaction with the market, where people are looking for a solution, is to find a way to store this energy. So after the sun goes down, that energy could be available for use. Anybody wants to take that? Where is Huawei now? and where is that opportunity for Jamaicans with the energy storage? You want to take it, Darian?
All right. Well, I will probably introduce by saying you are in fact correct, Sir Foster. From my position in interaction with the local market, energy storage is one of the biggest concerns, and it will be the turning point for Jamaicans in terms of gaining full control of their power and energy costs. For commercial and residential customers, as you say, we are here in Jamaica. We have the amazing sunlight, the energy from the sun throughout the course of the day, and essentially generating power and getting power in the daytime is fine. But when the energy storage for nighttime comes into play now, that's where things
And
are a
it's
bit
cost-
tricky.
it's
The
costly,
cost
yeah.
gets interesting. However, there aren't many solutions available right now, especially for like large commercial entities who want to run their manufacturing plants, their factories, and any type of refrigeration activities where it's a 24-hour operation. So with Huawei has now come on board by having two type of solutions, which I suspect I'll allow Martin to speak about.
You
the two
just said
options.
there's no solution, but
No, well,
Huawei
they're
has
not-
a solution.
No, so there are not many readily available solutions
But
on the market
Huawei-
right now. But Huawei now has been working in their own roadmap, and they have now come up with two solutions, which I suspect will impact our nation positively.
So that storage capacity you're saying has been launched and available through Huawei. You want to take that to
I'm
Martin?
going to allow Martin to speak about that.
Yeah. The problem with renewable energies was that they're intermittent, right? So you can only generate through the sun, and then you're not at home. So what do you do with the energy, right? We have the residential batteries already available for your homes, but now the game shifter is Huawei has developed a new product that is available for commercial applications, which is a bigger storage battery, like Darian mentioned. So if you have a manufacturing plant and you want to operate at night, you can collect all the energy during the day, store it, and use it at night, and still have that affordable energy to increase your margins in
Did
your
you say
production.
affordable? Because
Affordable.
that's also the concern.
Yes, sir.
Is that affordable?
That's my question.
I mean, how affordable would that be?
So now, if we see Jamaican energy prices compared to other regions, Jamaica is higher in energy price. It's around 40 cents.
40 cents US.
Yeah, US dollar. I'm from Guatemala. In Guatemala, the price is 20 cents, so it's half.
20 cents in Guatemala.
Yeah, so that even in Guatemala, with that price of energy, you saw the picture that Victor showed. There's already projects that make sense economically with half the price cheaper energy than in Jamaica. So I think it's a great opportunity for business owners to evaluate this new product and this new opportunity for you.
So what you're saying, what I'm seeing there on the screen, represents the nighttime storage for commercial and industry and so on, right? The factories and all of that.
Yeah, in this case, it's a private energy producer, and they cover the clouds. They had an issue where clouds come in and the generation lowers down, but then with the battery, they can keep grids stable, which is another very important thing that storage provides to grids, is grid stability. It's not only having energy, but having energy that's stable. So that's another thing that storage brings for this type of solution.
Okay. Hector, the solutions that Fosrich brings to the market, I mean, affordability is a key thing. My neighbor, I just have to call him my neighbor because he's my neighbor. My neighbor wants to ask, the regular householder, how is Fosrich making the product available and affordable to them?
Okay, yeah. You hearing me? Yes, right. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Foster. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of ways that we can do for being more, affordable, having more affordable solutions. Yeah, for sure that we always are looking for how to can get partners, right, that can give us that kind of opportunity. Because you know that the main obstacle, for sure, that when you want to do or develop a solar project is the initial investment, right? Because we know, everyone knows, and everyone can be sure that it's going to be payable in 5 to 6 years, no more than that, right? And after those years, you are going to receive the full benefit of all the savings that you're going to have. However, what happened with the national investments? That is a huge question, because affordability could be with lower prices, but that market, if we saw internationally speaking, those prices are already set almost, right? It's an average price. It's going to depend on how reliable will be the product that you're going to have, right? That is key, because we are going to see a lot of products in the market that could be good at the beginning, but at the end will not going to be reliable enough. And that's why we are talking about a huge investment that you have to do, right, in terms of the normal one that you have. And what happens if you are bringing products that are not completely reliable? That's why the first point from my perspective is giving solutions that are completely reliable for you, right? That will work in the future. It will work in the long term, not just in the short term. But the second one is looking for alternatives on how to finance those, right? And that is a matter that they are constantly looking at, because what we are giving to the market is not a product, it's solutions, right? And for us, that is the most important part. Because what happens if I can sell a product, I'm going to be happy. But are you going to do it? Are we going to bring more opportunities to the market? It's a huge market outside. When we saw the presentation for Huawei and what Huawei is doing in other countries like Dominican Republic, that it has just Huawei, I'm talking about just Huawei, an installed base already installed of 250 megawatts, right?
What did you say? 250
megawatts, and we have just
power installed in Dominican Republic.
Exactly, just Huawei.
Was just Huawei.
Something is missing here in the market, right?
What is the installed amount in Jamaica by Huawei?
2 mega.
250 in Dominican Republic
and
200 megawatt.
Exactly.
Is it something? What's happening here?
Yeah, we are just starting. Okay. We are just starting. That is the big point. But you understand when you see those kinds of numbers, that also has to be done also in the island, right? Yes. Something is still missing. Something is still missing that could be in terms of the regulation for the energy, right?
So the regulation is also a challenge. But I think, are you thinking, because in Dominican Republic, they have strong regulations too, and they have financing barriers too, but they are hurdling those barriers. Can you say something about what else is happening in Dominican Republic and this solar thing?
Dominican Republic has currently the biggest solar powered plant in the Caribbean with 30 megawatts, which Victor showed. So like Hector mentioned, I think we are missing, but we are at the right time here to start thinking about what our neighbors are doing, what other countries in Central America are doing, and start promoting that shift and that mix, that energy mix that we were talking about, because we cannot depend only on one source. We need to mix it up, create this energy security, and create new opportunities for the Jamaican businesses and Jamaican people.
Okay. Victor?
Well, I think that one of the most challenge that we faced right now, one is some incentive policies and regulation. This is one of the most challenge. And the second challenge that maybe we can face is the infrastructure. For example, if we want to build a 100 or 200 megawatt installation here or everywhere, we need the capacity. So this is a challenge that we need to face. If to invest in infrastructure to get the grid more bigger, so the private company can invest more and open some PPA, and then we can open this energy market.
Okay. We are almost out of time. We are told to stop, but are there any questions on what you have heard here? You are probably scalability. The solar system. Who wants to take that?
Scalability in terms of what? Because Huawei has a solution for every segment. So in terms of residential, commercial, utility scale, we need to create and find that mix. Like I mentioned before, we're not promoting 100% renewable. I think that the solution has to be a mix of energies to create that energy security and create that stability for countries that we can rely on.
Okay. I think also the question might mean if you start small, if you want to get to a point and you start small, is it scalable? Yes or no? It is.
Yes, it is.
It is scalable. Question, please.
Yes, good morning. Good presentation, gentlemen. I'm Dwight Acosta from HDF Caribbean Energy.
Okay.
I wanted to understand a little bit about the Huawei storage solution that you mentioned, and to understand specifically if the storage is good for the duration of the night. Because I know, like battery storage, one of the limitations is really the duration. How have you dealt with that aspect of it?
Who's going to take it? Yes.
Yeah. Actually, our batteries can achieve, depending on the size. For example, we study every solution project by project. So if you need 1 hour, 2 hours, even 8 hours of power by storage, we can give you. So storage is very important a point. It's not only like works as a UPS and to deliver at night. Storage or batteries have different type of application. For example, frequency regulation, work stability, voltage regulation, peak shaving, valley filling. So there are several type of applications. So sure, we can, for example, if you want 10-hour capacity, we can.
Okay.
Yes, we can do that.
Right.
We are out of, yes.
And just to complete the discussion, I mean, you spoke about storage, but storage is presenting itself in other forms. So for instance, the company I work with is looking at hydrogen storage, which is converting renewable intermittent energy into stored hydrogen and reusing that over the night, right? And that is more applicable for longer term storage as opposed to batteries, right? And we have a couple projects in the Caribbean, one in Barbados, one in French Guiana, and we're doing similar stuff in Trinidad also, producing green hydrogen from renewable energy.
Yeah, very good to know. And what could happen, our booth is over there, and the team will be over there. You can engage them in more strong conversations.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. I think we have come to the end. But listen, the question that you still must answer is whether we are going to sit back and allow this gift from God to go to waste. Our economy, it needs to grow. Our people need to be benefiting from the leadership that we give. And this is something that I think we are going to benefit from if we go renewable energy, and especially solar, to drive this modern economy that the country is to create. I thank you very much, and I thank those who have shared today, and I just hope that we will have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foster and the team. Very informative, very instructive. Certainly, affordability is the question, and I'm sure that you will continue to work with all the possible alternatives in order to make it more affordable for us to make this kind of long-term investment decision. Okay, this next session, as we're moving right along, we're getting back on schedule. We'll speak about the ESG silver bullet or hindrance to Caribbean development, the whole aspect of ESG. And our moderator will be Luana Williams, Ms. Luana Williams, President and CEO of Proven Wealth. And I will invite Luana to come forward and introduce her panel.
Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if we're lucky or unlucky to be the session right before lunch. So we'll try to keep you guys engaged as much as possible. Welcoming you today to a special segment, I believe, As mentioned before, my name is Luana Williams, and I am the acting president and CEO of Proven Wealth. Today, I am joined by three esteemed gentlemen who will continue the conversation we've been having and enjoying around access to the capital markets globally and regionally. Just to note, as we have been going in this order, after each presentation, there will be a short question and answer segment, and you'll have the opportunity to engage our speakers directly. And then once that's finished, we'll move on to the next presentation. So let's get right into it. Globally, there has been rising susceptibility to environmental risks like climate change. We've all heard that word. Some of us believe in it, some of us don't. Social risks such as crime, which Jamaica, unfortunately, we are no stranger to, and governance risks, which includes white-collar crimes. The Caribbean, no exception to these issues. But what these issues all highlight is the rising importance of environmental, social, and governance issues and governance responsibility. And also it creates the opportunity for these issues to create value for shareholders. But some people are still doubting the validity of ESG, and that is a global conversation that has been going on. Today, Mr. Rene Roma, who is the commercial advisor for the Dutch Caribbean Securities Exchange, will speak to this issue. Rene is very experienced in the region, having worked for the past 28 years in the areas of trust and investment banking services. Today, he will provide some valuable insights on ESG and its impact on Caribbean development. So we welcome Rene.
We can sit down. Yeah. I don't know. Do you have a clicker? I can do it without the thing. Good morning. Morning. Let me start with saying that indeed I'm really honored to be here, that we are invited by the JSE, Dr. Street Forrest and her team. We've been coming now to Jamaica a few times successively, and I'll explain a little bit how that came to be. And when I say we, Luana already explained that I'm with the Dutch Caribbean Securities Exchange. Now, when I say the Dutch Caribbean Securities Exchange, I think it's good for you guys to know that it is established in Curaçao. Most of you have heard of it, some of you have been there. But I think there's also probably a question, well, what does a small island like that do with an exchange? It's a bit weird, isn't it? I mean, you guys have, what is it, 2.6, 2.7 million people. You have another diaspora in the United States of about, if I'm not mistaken, 800,000. So, you know, it makes sense to have developed a capital market. And again, I want to really recommend and commend the JSE. What they have done in the past 20 years is not nothing. With respect to the Dutch Caribbean Securities Exchange, very, very quickly an introduction. It's an exchange, again, established in Curaçao under the supervised by the central bank and under license of our Ministry of Finance. A few highlights that I think are important is that recently, and when I say recently, it's really recently, in November 2022, we got our long-awaited and long-fought-for recognition by the United Kingdom's HMRC, His Majesty's Revenues and Customs. Clearly, as you can understand, for a small exchange that wants international and it needs international recognition, this was a big step. So we're very happy with that. But maybe we're even more happy with the fact that, as I mentioned, last year in June, we had our first meetings with Dr. Street Forrest and her team, because we were thinking, you know, as a small exchange, you have to realize that you have to look outward. Again, Curacao is small. Curacao has about 150,000 people only. So it's absolutely impossible to run an exchange profitably and sustainably only with your local market. The luck we have in Curacao is that, as most of you guys may know, is that we have a quite extensive international financial services history. I dare to say that the whole concept of fiduciary/trust business was invented in Curacao during the Second World War. And I won't get into details of that, but you can check it, just Google it, and you'll see that that's where it all started. So we have in our DNA to think outwards, to think internationally, because it has been like this for, by now, 70 years. In that whole process of looking outward, already in 2017, we had our first contact with JSE. And ever since, we've kept contact, because we realized that what they have done in Jamaica and in the Caribbean is quite unique. We think that a cooperation with the JSE can bring a lot to the table for both parties. Obviously, as in more things in life, you know, love has to come from both sides. So there has to be something in it for JSE, and there has to be something in it for us. And in that sense, we have signed in December an MOU with the JSE, and we're working together for this area. And the first two, let's say, real tangible areas that we're working on is, first of all, the e-campus that they have created, and second of all, to see up to what degree we can share with them some of their trading platform capabilities. That as far as the DCS6. Now, having said that we are small, a small island, and talking about ESG, it is a topic in Curacao. And I'm somewhat proud to say that, and you may have heard about this, this is the so-called Greening Government Initiative, which is an initiative that was launched by the governments of the United States and Canada. And at this moment, there's about 13 countries that signed on to this initiative. And Curacao is up to now the only country, because yes, we're an island, but we're also a country, is the only country in the whole Caribbean area that has signed up to this. It's an initial step, of course, because all the plans, et cetera, still have to be worked out. But I think it's a very good step. In that same focus of looking outward, we have partnered up with a group out of the Netherlands. As you know, Curacao forms a part of the Dutch kingdom, and we have a lot of links business-wise with the Netherlands. We have partnered up with a dedicated finance powerhouse in the Netherlands called Sustainable Capital Group. And these guys focus really both on equity and debt, on financing the low to mid-corporate ESG projects, basically all over, but primarily in Europe. In our talks, we've indicated to them that we think that in the Caribbean area, there is a lot of opportunities to do financing in that respect. If you think about the fact that their general tickets run from anywhere 25 million to 500 million euros, this could be perfect for the Caribbean. Now, really, to the question, ESG, is it an opportunity or a hindrance? And of course, I could have kept my presentation like really short by just saying it's a great opportunity. Thank you very much, and continue. I'm not going to do that, but yes, that's definitely my opinion. I think it's an enormous opportunity. We just heard in the panel before us, and one of the gentlemen who stood up talking about hydrogen. But very quickly on ESG as a buzzword. It's somewhat sometimes weird to me that only recently, and when I say recently, that's 2004, we have really been addressing the issue of ESG. If you think about it, it was all the way in 1992, that's 30 years ago, 30 years ago, that the United Nations, for the first time, was talking about inclusive economies, but there was no mention of ESG as such, environmental, social, governance issues. What do they mean, and why are they important? As a matter of fact, it was only in 2004 that the United Nations Global Compact and the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs published a report, and some of you may know it, which was called Who Cares Wins. And in that report, 2004, is the very first time that on a professional level, the concept, the issue, the questions around ESG were launched. So that's pretty fresh. That's pretty, it's a short time ago. Thank God it has come to the forefront because, as we all know, ESG goes way beyond only the climate control. When we talk about the environment, part of that is the climate control. When we talk about social, part of that is our personnel. What do we do for our personnel? But maybe more importantly, what do we not do for our personnel? We have seen all over the world developments like the Me Too development, also on the work floors. That's also social. What, again, do we do for our personnel? But maybe more importantly, what do we not do for our personnel? We should ask ourselves those questions. They're too important. And then the G, the governance. We all know, and especially in the past 12 to 15 years, corporate governance has become very important. You know, how does a supervisory director have to behave? How does a managing director have to behave? What do you report, yes or not, to your shareholders? How should shareholders behave, et cetera, et cetera. But when you talk about governance, it goes way beyond that, of course, and it is how do you position yourself as a company, whether it's a large company, listed or not, or it's a small SME, how do you position yourself in your community? And we have to be honest, I think, that probably 85 to 90% of our businesses do not ask themselves that question. It's 100% focused on the bottom line, and it's understandable. So that's why talking about ESG remains, to me, extremely important. Now, with respect to the question for the Caribbean, is it a disadvantage, or is it, is it a hindrance? There are some difficulties, of course, and it is, of course, you need a lot of human resources and financial resources to really get this thing going. But again, with the necessary focus, it should be possible. Another somewhat complex issue with ESG is, of course, that there's hardly any real controllable data available yet. Now, we all know that, in today's world, big data is what drives everything. So all we have to do, guys, it's very easy. Make sure that on the ESG side, in cooperation with the government, we get to systems, to reporting systems, even if it's at a very high level in the beginning, but that we get to reporting systems whereby we get some real indicators that we can measure and that we can then book into data that we can use. ESG integration takes time. Yes, of course, it takes time. The simple fact that I mentioned that already, or only in 2004, the ESG term was used for the first time, and only now, the past 2, 3, 4 years, we are really talking about it, is testimony to that. Now, we mentioned the hindrances, but what about the advantages of ESG? And some of this came up already in the previous presentation, and that is that in the Caribbean, we have one thing in common, and it is that we have a lot of islands. We all need energy, and we have an enormous, how do you call it? We are very independent. Everybody does their own thing on their little island or their big island when it comes to energy. We have to import oil. We import gas. there was one gentleman who mentioned hydrogen fuel. And it's interesting because if you look at a report from the Inter-American Development Bank of last year in November, they have a pretty extensive research in that report on the possibilities for the Caribbean to become one of the first larger areas where hydrogen fuel may become the by far leading fuel needed for our industries, etc. And why is that? That is because all of us in the Caribbean, in principle, have two things. And that is indeed the sun that was mentioned before, that shines so nicely upon us, and the wind. I can give you an example that in Curacao, again, a small island, at this moment, about 35% of the electricity that the island needs is produced by windmills. These windmills produce it, send the electricity, sell the electricity to the local electricity company, which then, of course, distributes it. This is one project. These same guys are now working on an extension of it, which would in one shot bring us to almost 80% purely on wind energy. That's quite a feat for a small island. Now, there is other islands that have much more capacity, much more vast pieces of land, and also, depending on the geographical position, of course, have much more possibilities with the sun. In other words, if we combine the power that we can generate with wind and or with the sun, and we gear that towards the creation, the production of hydrofuel, and we make sure that, again, working together, we distribute this from a few, let's say, main players in the Caribbean to the rest of the Caribbean, we might be in for a surprise, and that is that for our economies, our fuel that we need to run our factories, etc., might become extremely, extremely affordable. To close, for Jamaican investors and or other investors, the Caribbean area is very, very interesting. I know that, especially, which again I mentioned before, we have a good relationship with the Netherlands, of course. I know that in the Netherlands, there are a lot of pools of private capital that are extremely interested in looking at this area about financing on either equity or debt basis, these type of green projects. So again, there, we signed an MOU with the Jamaican Stock Exchange, and we hope that together we can also tap into this potentially very large sector of the business community, which obviously is going to need financing. Having said that, I think that in conclusion, we can indeed say that sustainable finance in the broadest sense of the word, including paying attention to ESG factors, is here and will stay. And the only thing that we as professionals have to sort of find out yet is where exactly, or where more or less do we put the attention between the risk-return issues and, on the other hand, the importance of being ESG ambassadors. So with that, I would like to finish my presentation, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Renee. And at this point, I'd like to turn over the opportunity to the audience. If we have any questions based on Renee's presentation, we'd love to take them now.
I was too clear.
Hello. Gerald Hamilton, Equity Capital. One of the things that I know talking about ESG is really how to simply explain exactly what it would mean to the layman, just to somebody that really don't understand, you know, the whole aspect of, because ESG is somewhat new and you know, impacts a lot of industry. But can you simplify or maybe give an example?
Yeah. You know, let's just take an example on environment. And it pains me to say that on my own lovely island in Curacao, a big portion of our population still has no problem in throwing something out of the window on the street. I think it should be a crime, but then again, I can't say that too loud. It's tiny little things like this that we should, on a continuous basis, together with the government, be telling our people. And then explaining to them that this is just, you know, like it's this little stupid cup that you throw out that you shouldn't be doing. Why? And boom. But do it on a continuous basis. Let me put it this way. The gray in my hair is really age, okay? And I have on my island for 50-something years heard every 2-3 years there is like this campaign. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do such. But there has never been a consistent, every single day, guys, you cannot do this. Now, take the whole environmental issues, chop it up in whatever, 10 really important parts, and do that. And in that sense, I must say that coming back to what JSE has done with its e-campus, look at how you guys in the area, I mean, look who's sitting here. This has become a big business. There's a lot of professionals working in this area. This was not like that 20 years ago. They started educating the people on a continuous basis. And now, when I get to the airport and I say that I'm going to the JSE, and the immigration officer looks up at me and says, "Oh, you're listing?" I'm like, "You guys did a good job." You know what I'm saying? So that is important. The same goes for governance. The same goes for social things. Companies, every single company, small and mid-sized enterprises, should, as far as I'm concerned, be obliged to follow a course on what it means to be socially responsible. Even if you're a mom and pop shop and you have only 3 workers, you should know what it means, how you have to treat your personnel, what you cannot do towards your personnel. So if we start doing that, then it starts living in our community, and then everybody that's sitting here, the financiers, the bigger business people, and the government can top that off by taking them by the hand and continuing it.
Thank you, Renee. And what I hear from what you've been saying is that there needs to be a behavioral change for ESG to become a bigger priority in our region. So, you know, that will definitely take time, but we do realize that this is a very important issue that has to be brought to the forefront. Thank you again.
Absolutely.
So we'd love now to move to our next speaker, Mr. Robert Cook. And just to introduce Robert, so, you know, we're all about listing, right? Especially in Jamaica, we speak about listing. Renee just alluded to that. But after a company has listed, how do you ensure that you remain relevant and, most importantly, compliant? Sometimes we don't think about that. What does it really mean to be a successfully listed entity? Mr. Robert Cook is the Senior VP for Market Development at the Canadian Securities Exchange, and he has been a member of the executive management team there since they launched in 2003. Today, Robert will be telling us how to succeed in the capital markets. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you. Oh, we're up. Okay. Yes, just to start, I'd like to thank the JSE and Marlene Street Forest in particular, and all the other people that helped out arranged this, Charlene Steer, Neville Ellis, Michael Johnson, Andre Gooden. Anyway, good to be here. This is my 5th time presenting here. And in the past, I've been told by some people, including Keith Collister and Earl Chapman, that my presentations were notable for their humor. And I decided that perhaps I needed a little bit more gravitas. So since I have a very difficult time putting on weight, I tried growing a beard, asked my wife, that didn't help. But I do have a navy blue suit for a change, so I think that helps. So one of the people at the JSC kindly suggested that I talk about how to make money in the stock market, do's and don'ts. Well, if I was expert at that, I'd be on the beach in the grill and not standing here. So you don't want to hear about my experience as an investor. So today I'm going to talk about another topic that I do feel very strongly about, and that is disclosure. Before I do that, though, I did take note that many of the speakers have been able to pepper their presentations with numbers to illustrate or elucidate their points. So I'm going to do that too. I have 17.3 billion, 9.2 billion, 816, and 113. And I'll tell you what those are. 15 and 113. And I'll tell you what those are for later. I'm going to discuss three areas. I'm going to discuss disclosure practices by issuers. I'm talking about listed issuers. I'm going to talk about investors, their relationships to disclosures, their research, and how they can reduce their risk profile. And then lastly, I will talk very briefly about stock exchange competition. So not everyone here would be an issuer, but I think you would probably appreciate these remarks, and I'd be surprised if there are many people that aren't already aware of some of these things, but I'd like to go over them nonetheless. So there are basically 3 types of disclosure by issuers. Firstly, there's a prospectus when they go public or when they are raising money after going public. There's timely disclosure, and there's continuous disclosure. Prospectus disclosure is described as full, true, and plain disclosure. Now, this is where the company, when it goes public, has to open its kimono and let everybody see inside the company. The first time I ever attended a conference about IPOs, one of the presenters got up with this process a couple of times, and you really should be aware that if you're going to do one, that there are 2 kinds of people that are guaranteed to read your prospectus. First are the regulators, and second, your competitors. But they are really designed to provide information to investors. So if you are interested in a company that has a prospectus, even if it's a year or 2 out of date, it's probably a good idea to have a look inside. If you are an issuer, you have to remember that full, true, and plain does mean all of those, but it's not cumulative. There's also a balance that needs to be there. If you overdo the full, you may not have the plain, but you can never overdo the true. Timely disclosure is episodic. It's what happens at any time, after any event, and it's very important that companies become very proficient in providing timely disclosure. Whereas continuous disclosure is it's regulated, it's required. It's usually financial statements and annual reports, annual filings. And why are these things important? Well, good disclosure by the issuer not only informs, but it empowers investors. You can build trust and loyalty, and that is very important if you want to achieve success in the market, if you want to have stability in your stock price, and to be fairly valued as well. If you over-promote, your stock price may reach a height that it cannot sustain. And the subsequent fall will be a very negative event. You can't avoid ups and downs in the stock price, but you can limit that volatility if you are really good at providing disclosure. Continuous disclosure is also fairly deep and broad. There's financial statements, both annual that are audited and, of course, interim statements that aren't. There's also management discussion and analysis, which sometimes can explain and sometimes can obfuscate. And too often, it turns out to be boilerplate. But it is something that a company should really try to be efficient at so that it can really explain to the investing public what has happened and, to a certain extent, what might happen in the future. Continuous disclosure also includes news releases, what's on the company's website, public presentations. All of these aren't mandated, but they're still very important. And there are best practices that the companies need to follow. They need to be proactive, they need to be prompt, and they need to be precise. So being proactive means not being too reactive, anticipating what the market is going to be interested in, and making sure that your communication is well prepared and presented. So by being prompt, what I mean to say is that the company not only needs to meet its deadlines for important things, but also its own timelines. It needs to follow up on past announcements with regular updates. I put in be precise just because it's alliterative, but what I really mean is that it needs to be accurate and it needs to be clear so your message is understood. Now, I think that's enough about the issuers. I want to turn to the flip side, which is how to succeed as an investor. So investors need to stay informed. They need to be aware of the trends and the current issues in the market, both macro and micro. They need to be able to study what's available, learn to read, not as in just become literate, but become financially literate. Don't be intimidated by financial statements if you have not been educated in how financial statements work, because after you read them and become more familiar with them, and you read the management discussion and analysis that gives you some kind of a narrative to follow on the financial statements, you will be more comfortable with them. And then they will be a more useful guide for you. I think it's important that as an investor, you stay the course of your own goals, your own investment objectives, and also to keep a positive attitude, not an optimistic attitude necessarily, but a positive one, so that you're not swinging through cycles of fear and greed. If you follow the market like you follow a sport, you will get to know the market better and the participants in the market better. You don't want to just, read the scores. You want to read about the players. You want to read about their teams. You want to know what league they're playing in. You can learn something new every day if you follow it every day. You actually have to know a lot about yourself, what your risk profile is, what your time horizon is. Years ago, when I was studying for the CFA, I was introduced to an acronym called RATTLE-U, which was R for risk and R for return, A for analysis, T for time, as in time horizon, T for tax, as in what is your tax exposure? Are you looking at income or capital gains? You must be aware of those things. L was for legal and U was for unique. Things that are unique to you as an investor. And the acronym became RATTLE-U. I like to turn it into, well, things happen in the markets and don't let them rattle you. So enough about you. Let's talk about me. How to succeed as a stock exchange. I have bragged about the CSE in the past, so I'll try not to overdo it. But in Canada, there's very intense competition among stock exchanges. And we came in as the new kid on the block 20 years ago now. And in 10 years, we were an overnight success. So, yeah, it took a while because people didn't really understand why we needed another stock exchange and why competition was good in that respect. But we did recognize that there was an opportunity there. And what we did was we built our exchange focused on the issuer and what that issuer needs. Historically, stock exchanges started up as being an efficient way to trade securities. They were developed by the brokers, by the traders. But you need the issuers and their shares in order to have the trading. And what we wanted to ensure was that we would be able to introduce companies to the market at a relatively early stage in their development. So we did become a more junior stock exchange as things go, because the older and established exchanges already had the large cap companies. We provided transparency on our website. We call it one-stop shopping for all of the information that's available about the company, about their price, their news releases, their filings. There are CSE filings. We have one that's unique to our exchange called the Monthly Progress Report. We wanted to ensure that companies always stayed in touch with the market and didn't go into long, quiet periods. We also provide a link to regulatory filings, which makes them much easier to access and to read. Now, I mentioned that we're a relatively junior stock exchange, but we do have a few companies that have a market cap in the billions of dollars, although most of them are less than $50 million. But as a relatively young exchange, we get more IPOs than the other exchanges in Canada, but they do tend to be smaller in sizes. So when you are categorized as a junior stock exchange or a small cap stock exchange, a lot of people think that the market isn't liquid. So is ours a liquid market? Well, yes, on the whole, we believe it's a liquid market, and we do have some statistics on that because we have a lot of participants, all of them that are trading on the other exchanges in Canada are trading on ours, and our market's very efficient. However, the stock exchange isn't a liquidity provider. Sorry about that, didn't change that. I like to quote a former competitor of mine who said, "It's not the stock exchange that provides liquidity, it's the ability of the company to communicate with investors." And that was why I thought it was important to talk about disclosure. The company needs to tell its story, and they need to do it well in order to get liquidity in the shares of their company. The other aspect of disclosure that regulators really like to cite is a quote from a former Supreme Court Justice in the United States from back in the earlier part of the 20th century, who said that sunshine is the greatest disinfectant. And that way, the better the disclosure and the more the disclosure, the easier it is to determine whether or not a company is doing it right. And as Luana mentioned earlier, is in compliance as well. All right, and now for the numbers. So 17 billion shares was our trading volume last year. And the value of all that trading was over $9 billion. Of course, this is all in Canadian dollars. Our listed companies completed almost 900 financings that raised an aggregate of almost $2.5 billion. And we welcomed 113 new companies to our exchange, which has been typical of our growth over the past few years. So we now have over 800 securities listed on the exchange, and that was an increase of 9% over the previous year. And currently, the total market cap of all of our equities is about 25 billion Canadian dollars. So I hope that my words were as impressive as my navy blue suit. And I just want to close with a final word about our hosts, the JSE. Those of you who are participants in that market should consider yourselves lucky to have such a well-run, well-regulated, and innovative stock exchange as the Jamaica Stock Exchange. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Do we have any questions from the audience? We have time for one quick question. Going once, going twice, gone. Okay, so quickly. It's almost lunchtime, Robert. Oh, you had a question, Keith? Oh, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead, please. I would never.
Once already, so don't worry. Quick one, Robert. Thanks for the presentation. Not as amusing as your previous ones, but a lot of content. Can you just give us a quick overview of the opportunities you see to partner with the JSE, specifically to do with the fact that you only have a 50-page code, or this list of things to do? So you've adopted a easier regulatory model than, say, some other places. So we have a junior stock exchange code here. There's a book. Didn't bring it with me. I'm a mentor. So I'm interested in your view of how that works.
Okay, I can do that. First about opportunities for cooperation with the Jamaica Stock Exchange. Obviously, we can learn from each other. There are going to be differences in experience, and just our association with them has probably helped us. It puts things in your own exchange in better perspective when you understand what another one is doing. We also like to let the rest of the world know that we do have, well, it's called a memorandum of understanding, but I call it a BFF agreement. And we'd like to be able to promote not, each other, but also the issuers that are listed on our exchanges in different venues. As for our 50-page policy manual, well, it's grown a little bit since then, but what we focused on was creation of disclosure requirements, and then we have basic rules that the companies have to follow. There are a lot of requirements for public companies that are based on securities regulation at the Securities Commission level, or legislated in the Securities Act. Stock exchanges have the right and the ability to provide regulation above and beyond that, and we do so when it's helpful to the market. So we try to keep all of our rules to a basic minimum, what's required. The other way that we kept our policy manual short is that we wrote it in language that even a lawyer can understand. So we've had a lot of positive comments about that, and thank you for asking. Yeah, we definitely kept our
Thank
feet
you.
low.
All right, so we're heading into the home stretch. Access to capital has been a paramount concern and also has been paramount rather, to realize the sustained growth in any economy. Today, I'd say over the last 18 months, we have seen a lot of changes in the economic climate globally and in Jamaica and the Caribbean. We have seen an increase in interest rates over a very relatively short period of time, which has impacted both issuers and investors. But despite this, we know that there are still plenty opportunities, numerous opportunities across the Caribbean, and a lot of entities have taken advantage of those opportunities, entities small and large. The Massey Group is one such conglomerate, and that group is led by our next speaker, Mr. Jse Warner. Jse has been the president and CEO of the Massey Group of Companies since 2009. He has extensive experience in strategic management, and prior to this appointment, he served as a partner at the international management consulting firm McKinsey & Company. We now welcome Jse to speak on the topic, does size really matter? Mobilizing capital for companies to grow Caribbean economies. Mr. Warner.
Good afternoon. I want to let you know that I did not have breakfast this morning, so I can fully appreciate the rumblings you would be feeling at this hour before lunch. And I do recognize that you're probably ready to go. So, unfortunately, I don't have any presentation. I thought we could have a little chat about this topic. First of all, I don't know how they came up with the name of this topic. Does size really matter? To investors. Mobilizing capital for growing Caribbean economies. Now, I understand mobilizing capital for Caribbean economies, but how does size matter? Well, okay. Of course, size matters. Of course, we would all say. But then we'd also maybe say, well, it depends. And I think that is true. So if you think about the challenge we have with capital that is in many of our financial systems, that when we have these high interest rate environments, they tend to seek bonds, largely government bonds, and not get deployed into private sector investment. This is a trend that has happened every time there's some form of crisis. And, you know, if you think about why is the United States increasing its interest rates? They're increasing its interest rates because there's inflation in the United States and they want to cool down their economy. We are importers of that interest rate because when they increase their interest rate, those of us who have floating currencies, we have to increase our rates as well. Regardless of whether we had inflation or not, we have a requirement to, because if we don't do that, then there will be a flight towards US capital, US dollars, because it will become more attractive for people to invest in. And that's a challenge that we actually always face in our region. We are not truly masters of our own destiny in that dimension. And so, does size matter? Absolutely. Why is it that we're also dependent on what happens in the United States? Because size matters. Because it is a large large economy because it is the currency on which all international, well, the vast majority, beg your pardon, of international transactions take place. So it'd be very hard to escape the fact that size and scale matters. What about us? Jamaica, 3.2 or so, maybe 3.5 million people. Trinidad, 1.3, 1.4, Barbados, 350, Guyana, 700. You add us all up together, roll in the Dominican Republic, roll in Haiti, you're right, we maybe get to 20, 25 million people. I mean, but we had some speakers here from Dominican Republic just now. How integrated really are we into what's happening in the Dominican Republic? Not very much. How integrated are we into what's happening in Haiti? We love, Haiti, our hearts feel it. Not very much. How well are we integrated within CARICOM among ourselves, our English-speaking Caribbean? Well, maybe a little more. But for the mobilization of capital, really not that much. And that's a real challenge. So size matters. Size matters, yet we're unable to really pool the relatively small pools of capital we have to put it to work to grow Caribbean economies. And it's an interesting challenge. We talk about this all the time. We talk about it at conferences. We talk about it in meetings. We talk about it. We write about it. We have papers about it. We have, somebody asked me about the CSME earlier. But we kind of have this situation that is our own making, right? Because we all have some very powerful self-interest that keeps us prioritizing the needs of our particular island, company, rock, whatever, over the opportunity of true collaboration. And, I've been working with the CARICOM private sector organization for a couple of years, and trying to get this CSME thing revved up. And I thought today would be a good opportunity to kind of like throw the cat among the pigeons, right? Because we kind of say, well, it was the revised Treaty of Chagarama's fault, it's the politicians' fault, da-da-da-da-da-da. But perhaps it's our fault. Perhaps we are reaping what we are sowing. And I've come to really realize that we cannot rely on one particular stakeholder or group of actors to make this enormous change to overcome the significant challenge we have in front of us. It takes every single one of us. And if we're not prepared to throw our voices into the mix to demand some change, we're talking about having a common stock exchange or an integrated stock exchange. Massey's cross-listed in Jamaica. For us to get shares to be listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, we have to get Trinidadian shareholders to move their shares over to the Jamaica Stock Exchange. But Jamaican investors realize, those Trinis, they might want to sell here so that they could get access to hard. So we're going to give them a discounted price. So Trinidadians, well, why would I go and get a discounted price on the Jamaica? This is a level of market inefficiency of our own making, of our own design. And so the real benefits of cross-listing and being together, we just scratch the surface of it. Scratch the surface of it. And we'll continue to scratch the surface of it and make a little deeper indentation. We will never have the breakthrough until we all really get up and say, hey, we got to make this thing happen. And we have to throw our voices in with others to make this Caribbean integration a reality, because size does matter. And if you want to mobilize the capital that we have here in the Caribbean for the growth of Caribbean economies, we all have to solve that problem. And I'm proud to let you know, I'll give you back the 5 minutes because I am done. Thank you.
Thank you, Gervais. That was short and sweet. I think we'll all agree. And as we have been following this routine, we open the floor now for questions. And Keith says no. I made sure to look at him first this time. Any other takers? Okay, we have one. Leo.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Excellent presentation. The idea of cross-listing is a good one. It's an old one, and it's still very pertinent. One of the ways in which it comes to life even better is if shareholders who are on the Trinidad side or shareholders who are on the Jamaican side had similar levels of service and practice in how their shares were treated. So for example, I know someone who used to have shares of companies in Trinidad, and they would send the dividend payments in Trinidad dollars to the United States. And it would be a hard thing to try to get them to say, no, Trinidad dollars are only traded in Trinidad, send US. But that's something that needs to be administered at the exchange level so that shareholders are not in constant communication to try to convert checks and cancel checks and things like that. The information that flows from the exchanges with a cross-listed company is really important to have it harmonized and have it be at the highest level, especially when you're talking about investors who are in multiple markets. And of course, there's always the arbitrage question that comes with the shares as well. And your brokers in Trinidad as well as your brokers in Jamaica would be very concerned about those opportunities. So the question is, can the companies like Massey and those who are leading the way help to advocate with their shareholder groups for some of these service standards that can be consistent?
Yeah, can you hear me? Absolutely. That's what we are doing. We're involved in initiatives to actually work with the JSE and the TTSE and the Barbados Stock Exchange and all of the other exchanges here in the Caribbean to see how we can promote greater collaboration, service levels, registration of brokers, and certainly the whole idea of settling trades, dividend payments, understanding how we can do this in a seamless way, given the different currencies that we have within the Caribbean. These are some challenges that we definitely have, but I want you to know there is an initiative to work together to see what we can do to bring to bear to, I guess, ultimately our countries, to have this level of integration happen. And my request is to create some energy to promote this, not just from one or two people speaking, not just from the stock exchange, because the stock exchanges are doing a great job of speaking to one another and collaborating with one another and creating instruments among one another. But we have some hardcore regulation. We have some issues around, joining up for settlement of trades, registration. And if it's just a small group of stakeholders saying we need this, they can say that's just Massey because Massey crosses and they have a problem. They're trying to solve their own problem. But ladies and gentlemen, we are all missing out. All of us are missing out on this enormous opportunity. And we can't just rely on 1, 2, 3 people to be making some noise about this. We need to have more voices making noise. And that's what I'm here to say this afternoon.
Yes, excellent. Thank you.
I remember I was in Barbados when you folks were buying BS&T. I headed a brokerage company. And the issue at the time was the different triggers for a takeover bid. Jamaica, I forget what Jamaica's trigger was. Trinidad had a different trigger. Barbados had a different trigger. And those triggers were a function of the legislation in each country. So until there's a harmonization of legislation, we actors can talk as much as we want. The politicians are the key people towards a regional stock exchange. And if that doesn't happen, it don't matter how much we talk, because it's all politically driven. So my question to you is, how do we influence politicians to get on this train?
My goodness. Well,
I know it's a tough one.
I think that sometimes we forget that politicians work for the people. And if the people speak with a united voice about what they really need, it's hard for politicians to ignore. But we do not speak with a united voice. And I think this is an opportunity on this topic for those of us here gathered in this conference, those of us who are affected by capital markets, to speak with a united voice, to create the urgency for politicians to say, yeah, you know what, we need to move this up the priority list of things to accomplish. That's how I think we should do it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much to our audience.
Do you have time for one more?
No, I'm sorry, we got a wrap. You can ask him privately. He's a pretty amiable guy. So I'd just love to say thank you to our speakers for their insights provided this afternoon. And to our audience, thank you for the participation. We enjoyed it thoroughly. And to everybody else, please enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you for 3 good presentations there. 3 perspectives on success in capital markets, the whole ESG phenomenon, and of course, mobilizing capital across borders. And no other person than Jervis could have done that presentation. All right. As we move swiftly towards lunch, which is coming up next, one of our main sponsors will be discussing with us some new opportunities. NCB Capital Markets will be identifying for us a new alternative in the investment space. And I'm going to invite Anya Walker, Executive Vice President, Strategy, Research, Innovation, and Projects at NCB Capital Markets in Kingston, to join us as the moderator for this next session. Welcome, Anya.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Hungry, I know. So am I. So I'm going to try to keep the energy level up and keep you engaged. Our topic for this afternoon is seeking alpha in a challenging environment, right? Really can't see, so I have to put on my eyes. So we believe that this topic for this panel is very relevant because it is indeed a challenging environment in many respects. It was challenging before last week, and it is even more challenging now. And despite the challenges, securities dealers and their portfolio managers, their fund managers, we need to be able to continue to deliver attractive returns to our clients. And so I also think it fits nicely into the theme of the conference, Capital Markets Redefined, Achieving the Impossible, because delivering alpha type returns, positive returns in this type of environment may in fact seem impossible. And so it is requiring us to rethink the opportunities that we deliver to our clients. So without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. Our first panelist to join us on stage is Angus Young. Angus Young is Executive Vice President, Regional Investment Banking at New Markets at NCB Capital Markets. Angus joined the NCB Financial Group in 2014, and prior to that, his role, prior to his current role, he was Chief Executive Officer at NCB Merchant Bank, Trinidad and Tobago Limited. Mr. Young has a wealth of experience in investment banking that spans 2 decades. And throughout the Caribbean, he has also worked, having done capital markets origination in the OECS territories, Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana. Now he's here with us in Jamaica. And Angus is also a director of the Securities Dealers Association in Trinidad. Our next panelist is Mr. Denario Brown. Denario is Assistant Vice President, Strategy and Innovation at NCB Capital Markets, where he's responsible for identifying and driving new growth opportunities across multiple jurisdictions. the development of new products and services and channels, and is central to our digital transformation. He has over 14 years experience in the financial services industry that spans product development, digital transformation, innovation, and data analytics. And our final panelist is Alessandra Sachs. Alessandra is a regional wealth manager at NCB Capital Markets Cayman. He joined NCB with 12 years of experience in wealth management gained in Canada and the Cayman Islands with various firms. He specializes in cash management for large companies, identifying institutional clients on discretionary portfolio management, and wealth creation for private clients. He's an active member of the Cayman Islands CFA Society, and he is also trustee on the Chamber of Pension Plan Board, and was recently awarded the 2022 Investment Director of the Year by City Wealth. Nice. Alessandra, welcome. So, gentlemen, welcome. I am very excited to delve into this topic with you, seeking alpha in a challenging environment. But before we dive into, investment opportunities and looking at, where to find solid returns, it would be remiss of me in this environment not to discuss, have a discussion to start about, the environment, and just reiterate for investors the importance that we as securities dealers see for, the transparency and the security of clients' funds. Adam Grant, he's a professor at Wharton, and he specializes in organizational psychology. And he notes that, leaders tend to under-communicate their ideas by 9 times, right? And we know leaders love their ideas. And if leaders under-communicate their ideas 9 times, then it stands to reason that we cannot under-communicate as an industry how much we value transparency, the security of client funds, and also that this incident, as unfortunate as it is not representative of the norm in the industry. So to kickstart the question, I want to start with a question about, just the infrastructure and the frameworks that are in place to protect clients. And this question is for you, Denario. What are the governance and operational structures in place to protect investors and improve transparency around their investments in the local market?
All right, thank you, Anya. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So what are some of the operational frameworks that we have put in place? So the chairman of the Jamaica Stock Exchange on Tuesday night highlighted some key elements, right? Of course, transparency we're talking about. He mentioned the establishment of the Jamaica Central Securities Depository, where the assets are held in the names of the investors, right? That is key, right? The JCSD, the acronym, is a subsidiary of the Jamaica Stock Exchange, right? And with their own governance structure. And for our local securities, they know for the dematerialized securities, investors can log on, they have access to log on to view their securities, settlement of securities in real time, equities, and there's also the Jamaica Central Securities Depository Trustee Services as well that he mentioned, two that acts as registrar, paying agent, and trustee for several of our corporate securities, right? And over the years, we have seen an increase in the number of issues, debt issues, bonds and notes, corporate notes, and so forth. And these are available. Investors can see their assets. It's transparent. It's in their accounts. It's deposited in their accounts. And they have their governance structure that is separate from each broker-dealer, right? So these systems and these solutions, these frameworks that are in place are geared towards, ensuring that we have a strong foundation, which he also highlighted that Jamaica has a strong foundation on which we can build, right? So thank you.
Thanks, Denario. I'll come back to you with some more questions on transparency for investors. But Alessandra, I want to delve into our topic a little bit, seeking alpha in a challenging environment. For the benefit of everyone here, how are you defining alpha?
Yeah, so the textbook definition of alpha is the excess return over a benchmark. But the real world definition of alpha is generating wealth that you'll need in the future. So that excess return to really build your cash levels and build your wealth is really how I define alpha. Making money, basically.
All right. So this theme speaks to challenges in the operating environment. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that are facing the industry. So we're talking about coming into 2023, and in terms of the outlook, we're seeing higher for longer inflation and interest rates. Although inflation is easing, the expectation is that it's going to be elevated for some time. And interest rates, as a result, will be elevated for some time as central banks seek to tame inflation. We're also looking at the risk of a global recession and at best a sharp slowdown, with a recession in some of our major trading partners, with all the attendant risks for the local economy. And as a result, there was already a lot of uncertainty that was really adversely impacting investor psychology and sentiment, right? And locally, this has been compounded by the impact of the alleged fraud, which is really taking a toll on investor confidence. So, Alessandra, given the challenges globally, my next question is for you again. It appears that there are not a lot of opportunities to deliver attractive returns or alpha for investors. Do you agree?
Yeah, actually, I don't really agree. I actually think that this time that we're in right now is presenting us with abundance of opportunity. So I'm going to speak to you more from a global perspective, because in Cayman, I manage more global portfolios. But kind of everywhere I look, I'm finally getting excited about valuations, about opportunity, because we all know interest rates have gone up a lot and they might go up a little further, but interest rates aren't a death blow to making money in the stock market. If you look even right now, you have the reopening of China, which has been a huge boom. The valuations in China were lower than they were during the financial crisis. So 3 months ago, if you invested in Alibaba at $50, it's now trading at 120. I'm not the only one seeing value out there. If you look at insiders of multinational companies, they're buying shares. Private equity companies are buying stakes in multinational companies. If you look at Starbucks, Howard Schultz, the CEO, we bought over $10 million worth of shares at $70. The stock is now trading at 106. So even though on the daily news you see recession is coming, interest rates are going up, and it's basically doom and gloom, underneath those headlines, there's actually been some great moves and people taking advantage of them. Even today, one of the big opportunities in one of the sectors is actually energy. I'm not talking about clean energy or renewables. I'm talking about traditional oil and gas. Today, Chevron announced a $75 billion US share buyback. 75 billion, it's 20% of the company they're buying back. They also raised their dividend. You're telling me they don't see opportunity in the valuations right now? What happens is when we get to these points of crisis or uncertainty, the power shifts back to the investor. We demand more of a return. This is when you want to be investing. Private debt is another huge opportunity. Companies that normally can get easy access to cheap money can't anymore. So bankers like Angus, they're licking their chops. And investors like you are going to reap the rewards.
Thanks, Alessandro. Angus, next question is for you.
Sure.
Given the environment that we're in, with inflation being a global phenomenon and it's eroding real returns to investors, how can investors get access to alpha type returns?
Sure. Is everyone hearing me?
Loud and
Yeah?
clear.
Okay. So alpha, why is alpha important? If you're a millennial, like myself, give or take a couple years, and you're not independent, you're not independently wealthy, so you didn't inherit any wealth and you have to build your own wealth, you are not going to become wealthy unless you gain access to alpha.
my colleague Alessandro spoke about gaining alpha in public markets. I'm going to touch a little bit about gaining alpha in private markets. To gain alpha, you have to have an equity position in something. And the big private equity opportunities, the problem with it is access. So the common man doesn't traditionally have access to the big private sector alpha equity opportunities. So how does a common man gain access or benefit from these opportunities? And what happens is that more often than not, these opportunities need to have an investment bank at the table. And that is where we get called in. And when NCB Capital Markets gets involved in these opportunities, just because of who we are, what we've designed is a framework that brings these private alpha equity opportunities to the retail investor. And they benefit because we wrap these opportunities in a framework of risk management and corporate governance. And that's how we give the retail investor access to alpha private equity opportunities.
Thanks, Angus. So you would have, outlined private equity as one option. What are the other investment themes or avenues that you believe that are delivering alpha in this environment?
Sure. So some of the more popular alpha opportunities in this environment would absolutely what Alessandro spoke about in terms of energy, and that's both traditional energy and renewable energy. So that would be included, Anya, under infrastructure. All right. So we're talking about airports, seaports, power, telecommunications, transportation in general, but also coming out of COVID, we see a lot of alpha opportunities in the hospitality industry. And as we know, revenge tourism is at an all-time high. But I would also like to share with the audience that everybody in this hemisphere knows that the country with the highest growth in GDP is Guyana. And they're doing 40% plus growth in annual GDP. So how do we, as retail investors, gain access to those opportunities in Guyana? Again, you have to partner with those institutions that are regional, that have people on the ground regionally, and that apply their risk management and corporate governance frameworks to give the retail investor access to geographically differentiated equity opportunities.
All right, thanks, Angus. So if I'm supposed to summarize, you're saying that at NCP Capital Markets, we give clients regional access to assets that will allow them to realize attractive alpha type returns and also investment opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise be able to access. And then, Alessandra, out of Cayman, you're saying we give clients access to sophisticated markets and alpha type opportunities in those markets. So if I'm to kind of circle back the presentation to you, Denario, I mean, we can talk about, returns all we want. Investors still want to feel secure and want their investments to be transparent. So how do you believe that digital innovation in the securities industry and at NCB Capital Market is adding another layer of transparency while still opening up investment opportunities for investors?
All right, thanks. Are you hearing me?